J. Frank Dobie was a local teller in a way. You know, he's our guy. He is our teller. But Live Oak County has lots of really good storytellers. And so last year, Mickey Bendis, who's here tonight, was our first local storyteller. And tonight, our second local storyteller is Rodney Nance. He is the father of 2 beautiful daughters and a 5th-generation Live Oak County resident. After a 25-year career with the Texas Department of Transportation, Rodney spends his time improving his property, working cattle, and caring for his animals. He also enjoys hunting, fishing, and studying the settlement and ranch culture of the American Southwest. That's the bio Rodney gave me. But I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this man. He's back here going, oh no. He spent many years reenacting various historical scenarios at events across the state. He tans rawhide. He made, are you wearing that jacket? No. He's got a rawhide jacket that he wears, and sometimes I thought maybe he might wear it tonight, but he didn't. He is an appointee on the Live Oak County Historical Commission and is currently working on a project to photograph all the historical markers in the county. Some of his photos will be on a forthcoming Texas Historical Commission app. He's a humble man of many talents. I give to you Rodney Nance.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cash.
I always wanted to do that. I'm sorry. I'm not really Johnny Cash, but when I was first asked to do this, I was told I could tell the story in my own words or read it. And given that I'm just merely a consumer of tales rather than a teller of tales, we'll let Dobie tell the tale. And this is a tale about. This is from my favorite Dobie book. It's also his first book, copyrighted in 1929. It's the Vaquero of the Brush Country. It's the reminiscence of John Young, who was a cowboy from South Texas back in the really way early days. And anyway, it's my favorite book, and I chose some excerpts from the chapter of the Braceros. And I'm just going to read it, and but it's a great tale. It's a tale of when the West was really wild, just not far from here. This probably happened an hour and a half drive from where we are right now. But the Brasada, the brush country, marked the meeting of East and West. Desperados from eastern states as well as Texas counties to the east sought the border brush and its security. The Brasada had its 4 horsemen. These 4 men just happened along and took up headquarters at Dogtown, which is modern-day Tilden. Dogtown is. They were middle-aged, all gamblers, horse racers, and gunmen. One of them gave his name as Russell from Kentucky. We called him the Kentucky Colonel, and he looked the part. Another was known only as Gotch. He had a bullet hole through his ear. A third went by the name of Slim. The last was just Dan. The 4 horsemen seemed inseparably united. They had a pack horse on which they loaded all their possessions. They kept a few race ponies about their camp, and they generally had a horse to trade. Sometimes after camping around Dogtown for weeks, they would suddenly disappear. Then in a few days, they would be back with a string of Mexican ponies they claimed to have bought down in Mexico. They usually found a ready sale for them. If not, they drove them on to San Antonio. Now, McMullen County had 6 horsemen who were almost as close as the 4 horsemen. They were Tom McCoy, Jim Morris, Ben Corder, Ike Hill, Lee Pope, and myself. We mustanged together, cow hunted together, played monte together, danced together, drank together, and sometimes we fought together. To this gang, I confided my suspicions as to who was stealing our horses. We at once decided to investigate on our own responsibility. We rode up the Meta del Sol until we reached the divide between the Nueces and the Rio Grande. For several days we rode over the country, returning each night to the same camp. Then we found what we were looking for. It was a brush corral hidden deep in a thicket. It showed to have been used much for holding horses, but the sign was at least a month old. Immediately in front of the corral was a little opening. Leading away from it into the thicket was a distinct trail. We followed it. At the end of it, we found an old camp. Judging from the amount of ashes on the ground and the number of empty cans and greasy, sharp-pointed sticks used to broil meat on, the camp had evidently been used to a considerable extent. More interesting to us, it was going to be used again, for secured in a mesquite tree was a store of provisions. They were carefully put away so neither weather nor prowling animals could get to them. They had been there for a good while. The owner might appear at any time. I spied an old gunny sack sewed up with a rawhide string, and I recognized the sack the moment I laid eyes on it. It had come from the store of L.D. Young and Son, Dogtown, Texas. In our expectation, we talked in whispers and stepped about so our spurs would not jingle. Each morning for 3 days, we eased up on the brush corral, hoping to find something. Still, there was no sign of any other human beings other than ourselves in the country. One morning, we decided to make a final round, and then, if we discovered nothing further, to return home. Before we got to the brush pen, we saw fresh sign. We approached very cautiously. We need not have been so cautious, for all we found was 27 horses staked and hobbled outside the corral. All but 2 remuda mares, which were securely picketed, were saddle horses. Every animal bore a McMullen County brand. And among them were half a dozen horses that actually belonged to us. Horses we had seen in our own remudas the day we left. With the recovered stock strung out in front of us, we hit the trail for home. We felt confident of being followed. We had gone only a few miles, and after crossing a wide prairie, we entered a heavy thicket when we saw 4 horsemen following us at a run. Before they were well within range, they began shooting. Perhaps they only saw 1 or 2 of us and thought to bluff us into abandoning the horses. At the distance we were apart, brush being between us and all moving at a sharp pace, it was probably impossible for anyone on either side to recognize any one of the opposing party, though I did recognize the Kentucky Colonel's favorite mount. We returned fire as ineffectually as it was given, and the men veered into the brush, where they seemed to halt for a parley. We held a short parley also. As Ben Corder and Jim Morris carried only 6 shooters, we decided that they should keep the horses moving, while the other 4 of us, who had Winchesters, should cover the retreat. We took our stand in a kind of swag down which we felt sure the horse thieves would come, if they were coming any further at all. The brush here was rather spotted, very thick in some places, with open intervals between the mogotes. We had hardly got our horses tied and ourselves well placed when we heard a limb break and caught sight of the 4 horsemen. About the same time, they located us. We were 4 to 4. My partners were in kind of a line, and I was on the right end. Our understanding was that we would, if possible, take the enemy in order, I to give the signal. I was flat on the ground, and when I aimed at the first man, the barrel of my gun was resting against a mesquite limb. I could not miss. We fired almost at once. 2 men fell. We had not missed. The 3rd man was the colonel. He turned his horse broadside and began shooting. I shot at his horse while the other boys centered on him. He and the horse both went down. The 4th man's horse was either gun shy or he had been hit by one of our bullets, for he kept pitching and whirling around and around so fast that his rider could not shoot and we could not draw a bead. Slim, for that's who the rider was, finally got his horse on the run and disappeared into the brush. In the few seconds of time that the performance covered, we got in several shots, and from the way in which we saw Slim drop his gun, we felt confident that he had also been hit. We waited a few moments, and then, no move being made by any of the enemy, we mounted our horses and rode on. These men had been following us, and if they chose to discontinue the chase, we were more than willing. The fight was away out in the brush in no man's land without roads or settlers. We could not know whether the four horsemen had recognized us or not. We did not know for a certainty whether we had killed any one of them or not, although it was our belief that we had killed 3 of them and perhaps mortally wounded the 4th. If one or more of them were still alive, we did not want to advertise ourselves as the men who had caught them stealing horses and then fought them, so we agreed to go home and say nothing. Not one of us was an officer of the law. We had investigated on our own hook. No one would question where we had been or what we had been doing. It was a time when Texans tended strictly to their own business and let other people tend to theirs. After the encounter in the brush, no news of the 4 horsemen ever came to our ears. However, several days after we got back home, a horse that had been stolen from someone in the country showed up with a saddle on. The saddle was never claimed. Later, a Mexican over in the San Casimiro country found another horse carrying an ownerless saddle. We 6 frequently spoke of going back to view the scene of our experience, but we never went. That particular section of country is still in brush. The pastures that contain the brush are large. Probably to this day, no vaquero has ever chanced upon a bit of evidence of the skirmish now made public for the first time. For though we eventually told a few friends what we knew, no inkling of the episode ever got into a newspaper. So that's when the West was still wild in South Texas. Thank you.